On April 20th, 1999, Sue Klebold's ordinary suburban life was shattered. Her son and his friend killed 13 innocent people and injured 24 others before killing themselves at Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado. For years, Klebold remained publicly silent, but last year she released A Mother's Reckoning, Living in the Aftermath of Tragedy. The book is available now, and all profits are being donated to mental health charities. Klebold says writing the book felt like an important way she could contribute to the mental health conversation, which is infiltrating homes across America.
He had gotten arrested and gotten in trouble at school for scratching a locker and for hacking into the school's computer system and getting locker combinations because he was one of the computer technicians for the school. All those things happened in a little cluster in his junior year. Now, if I had known then what I know now, that changes in behavior like that can be symptomatic of some kind of developing mental illness, that he could have been dealing with depression, I didn't know those things, but that is certainly something to watch for.
She said her son also showed signs that he was planning a violent act, but again, they went undetected.
He was showing signs that he was in danger, but he wasn't showing them consistently to the same person. So it was as if everybody had a little piece of a puzzle. For example, he had a friend who had purchased a gun for him, and he had another friend who knew that he had a gun. But nobody realized that just simply buying a gun or that kind of gun ownership at his age and in his vulnerable state was an indication that he might be thinking of harming either himself or someone else. There were these signs. There was a paper he'd written at school in the last a few weeks of his life. And again, the school didn't have a protocol for how to handle that. They had him talk to the school psychologist. He just said, Dylan, you're not supposed to write bad words in a paper. And Dylan said, yes, I know.
Despite these rough patches, Klebold felt at the time that her son was straightening things out, that he was on the right path.
Dylan was a graduating senior. He was getting ready to go away to college. He'd been accepted at 4 schools. He had spent the weekend at a prom. He'd gone with friends. So from our perspective, he was a normal, healthy kid just living a normal life.
Because she thought things were getting better, Klebold was especially alarmed the morning of April 20th, when her son acted a little abnormally before school.
I had awakened early in the morning because I had to get to work. The house was dark. And I heard Dylan up. He was up early, and he was rushing down the stairs past my bedroom door. And I was surprised that he was up so early. And I opened the bedroom door, and the house was pitch black. I couldn't see anything. And I yelled his name. I said, Dill. And then I heard the front door open, and he called out, bye, and slammed the door and left. And that was the last time I heard his voice. I was alarmed. I didn't know why he was up early or what was going on in his head.
Still, Klebold never expected anything like the phone call she received later that day.
It was my husband. He'd left me a message saying that, he said, Susan, this is an emergency. Call me back immediately on the recording. And I knew from the tone in his voice that something had happened to one of our kids. And I called him back, and the only thing he said was, listen to the television. And I'm thinking, whoa, something is on television. And I thought, what could this be? Are we at war? What has happened? And then he got back on the phone and just started blurting out all the information that he'd been given in the previous few minutes, was that there was a shooting at the school. They believed that people in trench coats were killing people, that Dylan's best friend could not find him, that he hadn't been in class. The early morning class that I thought he'd gotten up for, he hadn't attended. And everybody was wondering where Dylan was. And so the information that I had in my head as I was driving the 26 miles to get to our house was something horrible is happening at the school. What could it be? How could Dylan be involved? And is Dylan involved, or is he possibly a victim?
In the hours and days that followed, it became clear her son was a perpetrator. That's when the blame for the tragedy began being assigned.
From the beginning, it became believed, for many reasons, that the raising of this child was the factor that caused the tragedy to happen. So I think as his family members, we were viewed, certainly if not as perpetrators, as accomplices, as being part of the reason that this terrible, terrible tragedy was taking place. Our governor went on national television to say that this is the fault of the parents. When all this was happening, I don't think it's possible to even understand the chaos of quite not knowing what had happened, knowing only that my youngest son had died. We were asked to evacuate from our home. We had nowhere to go. We couldn't go to a hotel because of our name. We were afraid people would recognize us. Thousands of media people were swarming into the city. So it felt very much, the only metaphor I can use is very much kind of like a Nazi Germany situation where we really felt that we were in hiding. We were afraid of what would happen if someone learned who we were. And we ended up living in a family member's basement for a number of days, and we were cut off from everyone that we knew and loved.
Then, in the midst of all this hiding and shame, Klebold received the first sign that her family could return to society.
One day in the newspaper, we saw a sign. Some of my friends and colleagues and neighbors had posted a great big sign on our front gate that said, "Sue and Tom, we're here for you. Call us." And they had assigned their names because they had no way to reach me. And when I saw that message from all these loving people that I couldn't get to, it was such a heart-wrenching feeling. All I could think of, it was kind of like Radio Free Europe. They had managed to get a message to us across all these obstacles so that I knew that there were people out there who were trying to help us.
In the ensuing months, with the support of her friends and family, Klebold tried to put her life back together. She even wrote letters to her son's victims.
In order to write about their loved ones and to write a letter personally to each family, I had to read about the individual who was killed or hurt from newspaper articles. And it was so painful for me. It's one thing to think of someone as a number. It's quite something else to realize that these were precious, beloved human beings and that Dylan robbed them of their lives. It was just so terribly hard. Yet, I felt that it might in some way be helpful to them to hear from me, to know that my son did something terrible, but, I am not my son, and that I am sorry for what he did. And I just felt compelled to say that and to reach out.
However, facing the trauma inflicted by her son continued to be a struggle that would wear on Klebold every day.
As we approached the depositions, where I'd have to meet the victims' families face to face, as we approached that, it was 4 years out, I began to have severe panic attacks and became almost unable to function. And I think that was the point at which I really began to understand what it feels like to have a malfunctioning mind and how we do lose our access to some of our tools of self-governance and to reason when we're in a very disturbed state of mind.
Despite her story, Klebold says parents need to know that mental illnesses are not inherently violent.
People who do have a mental illness are rarely violent or dangerous to other people. I have to be very, very careful of associating mental illness with violence. Most often, if they are a threat to anyone, they are a threat to themselves.
And even if people can't identify completely with Klebold's trauma, there is still an important lesson to learn in the tragedy of Columbine.
The chances that your child or one of your loved ones would ever take part in a mass shooting, the chances are 1 in millions. But the chances that someone you love may be having thoughts of suicide or maybe struggling, feeling some internal agony or pain, those chances are much, much greater because we know that certainly for you, suicide is the number 2 cause of death for young people. So it's very, very important for all of us to learn to listen better, to ask questions more effectively. I recommend that everyone take mental health first aid training so that we can learn a little bit better how to listen without judgment, to listen without trying to correct people's feelings or tell them what they should feel. I also want people to know that if they are struggling with emotional distress or thoughts of suicide, a very simple first step is they can call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK, and that is all day, every day. A trained professional will answer the phone, and help them sort things out, get them in touch with resources if they need them. These are things I was not aware of before.
Again, the Suicide Prevention Lifeline is available 24/7 at 1-800-273-TALK. That's 1-800-273-8255. Sue Klebold's book, A Mother's Reckoning, is available now, and all profits are being donated to mental health charities. For more resources on mental health and suicide intervention, visit our site, viewpointsonline.net. You can find more information about our guests and archives of past programs there as well. I'm Gary Price.
The burden of Alzheimer's disease on the nation's families and economy is growing rapidly. The Alzheimer's Association 2019 Alzheimer's Disease Facts and Figures Report finds that an estimated 5.8 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's dementia, and 1 in 3 seniors will die from it. More than 16 million Americans are caring for a person with the disease. Dr. Keith Fargo is Director of Scientific Programs and Outreach at the Alzheimer's Association.
Alzheimer's is now the 6th leading cause of death in the U.S., and by 2050, the number of Americans with Alzheimer's is going to climb to almost 14 million. This burden to the country and the families is unsustainable, and it's critical that we continue to invest in Alzheimer's research to reverse this trend.
Fargo says in 2019, Alzheimer's disease will cost the country $290 billion. And without scientific advancements, that figure will top $1 trillion by mid-century. Learn more about the impact of Alzheimer's disease at alz.org.
Colorectal cancer is the second leading cause of cancer-related death in the United States, but it's one cancer that's highly preventable if people get screened. If you aren't aware, you can't prevent it. That's why Steve Edmundowitz, president of the American Society for Gastrointestinal Endoscopy, says it's good to know.
There are different screening tests out there and different recommendations for the age to start screening. There's a lot of information coming at consumers. Every screening test is not right for every person. Colonoscopy is considered the gold standard and is the only test that can actually prevent cancer by removing polyps. That's why it's important to talk with your doctor before age 50, because it's good to know.
Don't get your information from cute commercials. Talk with your doctor. Experts recommend colonoscopy and FIT tests as the best for people at average risk. ASGE has a handy tool to help you know when and how to get screened. Find out more at screenforcoloncancer.org. That's screenforcoloncancer.org.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Viewpoints is a production of MediaTrax Communications. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook to learn about upcoming shows and find a library of past programs on iTunes. Plus, you'll always find podcasts of our segments and information about our guests at viewpointsonline.net. Join us again next week for your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.